Who would have made a better wizard? Albert Einstein or Leonardo da Vinci? Have you ever wondered if Napoleon would have been a goblin, a dwarf, or maybe a human? No? Well, we have. We spend a week researching real people from history and throw them into a fantasy world. This is History 5e.
Good evening, Ryan.
Good evening, Alan.
Are you familiar with the term nice guy?
Nice guys are the guys who think they deserve a lot more from women than they actually do, just because they do really simple, mundane things that everybody does all the time, like open a door or say something nice, and they're like, why aren't you in my bed?
Right. So they're really only, like, nice, air quotes, to get something from someone, which really, that's not a nice thing to do. That's like...
Oh, it's very manipulative.
It's like the opposite of nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Same page. So today we're going to talk about the simp of St. Helena, the Smeagol of Sardinia, the master of miladying, Napoleon Bonaparte, the nice guy who took his anger out on Europe.
Wow, you really got me with the simp of St. Helena. That was a good one.
Thank you.
Wow. These intros, man, they just keep getting better.
So, Napoleon was born and raised in Corsica, which is an island actually just off the coast of Italy and a little bit to the south of France. So, and during his early years, really, I think it was the year he was born, Corsica actually got invaded by France and made a French territory. So Napoleon himself had basically Italian parents. They were Italian nobility, and so Napoleon actually had an Italian accent.
Minor nobility, though, right?
Very minor. Yeah. Like, they were not wealthy at all. But basically what that did is allow Napoleon to connect to commoners, which we'll kind of see later, which is definitely cool. So as far as his personality was concerned, he was really close with his mother, and he was very, very headstrong as a child. That said, he wasn't particularly large, and he got bullied quite a bit. He got into a lot of fights, but he was super smart. And so at 9 years old, he got a scholarship to a French military academy. And so he goes to this military academy a few years later and shows a lot of leadership capabilities and really just strategic genius.
Yeah, he wasn't. It's also important to mention that he wasn't cool there either.
No, he still got bullied a lot.
He had no friends. He was considered a loner, kept to himself. I mean, I think that was mostly because he had that real sense of, like, camaraderie with his, where he was from, and them getting invaded by France made it feel like, he's going to a French military school. He feels like he's literally, fraternizing with the enemy at this point.
Right, and he was looked on as an outsider because he was from Corsica, and because he had the Italian accent. All of the French, all of the French boys in this military academy totally looked at him like an outsider. But so what he did is spent a lot of his time researching previous military generals like Alexander the Great and things like that, and he studied a lot on how to utilize gunpowder and specifically artillery. Now from here, he goes to another military school, an even more prestigious military school, and he goes through their officer program, which is a 2-year program. He does it in 1 year. Like, dude is just super smart.
I mean, there is no person that we have done yet, and I honestly believe this, there is no person we will do with more ambition than Napoleon.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like, he is the most like, even when he was young, he was like, he had a thing that he was headed towards always, and he was always driving to get there.
Right. He was kind of like a couple of the other people we've done, where he was literally born and bred to be a soldier. He knew what he wanted when he was super, super young.
Yeah.
And he knew he wanted to learn how to murder people. So,
Yeah, that's not going to be the last callback either. He had some stark similarities to Hannibal in a couple different ways. I'm sure we'll get to it.
I'm almost positive he studied Hannibal. Almost positive.
Had to have. He studied like every general before him and took all of the best parts of their... I mean, he was just a smart dude, and that's how you do it. You take the good parts of the past and you make it better for the future.
Yep, absolutely. And so once Napoleon actually gets accepted into the military, he's immediately given command of an artillery unit because of his promise in utilizing artillery and all that stuff. So now when he joins, something kind of big happens called the French Revolution. And so Napoleon has to pick a side, and he sides with the revolutionaries. And from here, he begins fighting not only the royalist side of France, but also France has kind of just been in constant wars with other people like the British, Spaniards, etc.
Yeah, and it's important to mention, I think he saw the revolution as like a way for him to make it to the top in an unconventional way. So like he knew as a minor nobility that his road to the top, whatever that may be, it wasn't going to be as easy as, you know, people that were born of high nobility and they had an easier lot to get there. So this revolution he saw as an opportunity. He's like, okay, maybe I can get in with this revolution. Maybe I can, you know, raise up the ranks there. Maybe this thing, you know, ends up working out and I become, I have all the power I want. And power's, we'll get to it, but it's a big thing in Napoleon's life.
Yeah, and just like a lot of the other great commanders that we've talked about, merit was a huge thing for him, and everything that he accomplished was, a lot of it was of his own merit and the people that he chose to place around him. So basically it was huge for them, so it made perfect sense that he sided with the revolutionaries. So from here, Napoleon goes into his first real battle against France's enemies at Toulon. I don't know how to say it.
You did great.
Thanks. And basically what had happened is these combinations of Spanish and French forces had taken the city, and not only that, but they had a bunch of ships there in sort of like a blockade. And what the French commanders wanted to do was essentially shell the soldiers out of the city. But what Napoleon decided is that he wanted to fill his cannons with incendiaries and actually set the ships ablaze so that they would be stuck, and so to sort of ruin their morale and things like that. And a lot of the other commanders were really skeptical, even people higher up than him. But what happened was that it worked. And the way that Napoleon would lead, and this was one of the first battles that he showed it, is that he did not just stay on the back lines like a lot of the great commanders in the past. He would be right in the thick of things a lot of times, lead charges, things of that nature. And what happened was, after this battle, his strategies were so successful that he actually got promoted to brigadier general, and he was only 24 years old. So he has a lot of time left ahead of him, and he's already basically the commander of the French army. Now, it wasn't all sunshine and daisies for Napoleon. In 1975, there was a big rebellion by royalists. There was about 30,000 of them. And what Napoleon did, now these are French royalists, just to clarify, so these are his own people, and he actually shot grape shot into the crowd, which just slaughtered them, like thousands and thousands of people. So he didn't care who you were. He was not particularly merciful, and he would pretty much do anything to win.
Yeah, if it was gonna get between him and his end goal, I mean, he would do anything, and that's definitely a theme with some of the people we've covered as well. But like he would do anything to get to that goal.
Yep. And I should probably explain what grape shot is for those who don't know. Rather than putting cannonballs,
it's little grapes, right? They take all the little grapes in the vineyards and they take the seeds out, and then they fire the seeds with their mouth. That
would be a sick party trick. Just shoot wine into the crowd. Anyway, I digress. Grape shot are very, very small. Not very, very small, but they're smaller. Not quite BBs, bigger than that, about the size of grapes, hence the name grape shot. But they're lead balls.
Yeah, it's
that
like
get
similar
shot.
to a buckshot blast, right? Like,
Imagine a giant shotgun.
right?
Yeah. So, not particularly nice.
No, not at all.
Now, at 24 years old, Napoleon's a bit of a late bloomer. He really, really wants to, get in good with the ladies. However, Napoleon even admitted in a lot of his memoirs and things like that he really, really struggled when speaking to women. On top of that, Ryan, I think you have a description of some of the women that he tried to court and how they described him.
I don't have specific things from women, but they did say things like he was humorless. They said he had loose skin. I'm not sure what that means.
A yellowish complexion.
He had a yellowish complexion, like somebody with maybe
sickly.
like a light liver disease or something like that. Possibly a kidney that's failing. I don't know if you're familiar with the way that skin looks when that's happening, but overall, I think one of the first women he wanted to court that he had a big crush on found him, and this is an exact quote from her, repugnant.
Yeah.
So, not a lady killer. I mean,
No.
there's so many
And
pictures
she
of
seems
him, and
terrible.
like there's memoirs of him, and there's like, this is one of those people where there's just a ton of information on it because, I mean, as we know later on, he had a lot of time to write about, some of this. But, and he was like a giant, one of the biggest people we've ever covered in history. But,
Not literally.
I didn't think he was that. Not literally. I didn't think he was that bad looking. Like, am I missing
No,
something?
I didn't either. I don't get it.
He's not like, he wasn't a Da Vinci, but he's not like a Michelangelo.
Right. And honestly, when you're comparing his portraits to the portraits of the women that he was courting, I just...
Oh, yeah, man. He should be pulling compared to them.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was bad out there.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but... So, yes. So, he falls for a woman named Josephine.
Oh, Josephine.
Is a recently widowed woman with a couple of kids and basically is a giant skank, for lack of a better term.
Wait, they actually have a word for her. What is it?
Do share.
No, and I thought it was a bad word that starts with T and ends with T, but it's actually a different word. No. A much worse word. They actually called her... the British people actually are the people who coined this term. They called her a tart, which I didn't know what that meant because when I think of tart, I think of like, I think of bitter and like things like that. But I actually looked it up. It just basically means like what a modern day thought means. Like,
Okay, perfect.
It's like promiscuous, like many sexual partners, like something like that. And,
which is fine. But if you're going to be married, maybe chill out a little bit.
Right. But I mean that, back then it wasn't
cool.
the same really like with this kind of stuff, but it was not often that the women were doing that. It was often the men who would have mistresses, and that was just for whatever reason accepted. But
it's that double standard.
Yeah, but it wasn't the women in this case usually that were having multiple suitors, but I'm sure we'll swing back to Josephine a couple times during this.
Right, and by all accounts, Napoleon seemed faithful.
He loved Josephine. Woo.
He definitely loved Josephine, but it seemed a little bit doomed. There was one account where actually on their wedding night, they're doing the hippity dippity, and her dog bit
What's
him in
the
the
hippity dippity?
It's the sex.
Oh,
sex.
I thought that was a dance. I literally started picturing them like swinging their hips in a dance.
No. They're banging.
Okay. Wait, say it again. What happened during the hippity dippity?
Josephine's dog bit him in the leg. Supposedly. It's like
awesome.
It's like a rumor. And so after this, 2 days after this, he actually leaves to go to war with the Austrians in Italy. So not much of a honeymoon there. And really, Josephine was kind of psyched. Napoleon would write her, and later, Josephine would read his love letters in front of her friends and call him amusing. Like, actually super... Like, I really
this
don't like
relationship was
Josephine.
so toxic, dude. If I was
It
in
was
there with
super
Napoleon
toxic.
in the tents, with the boys, I'd be
Yeah.
like, you got to find a new wife, dude. She's the worst. But he was enamored by her. He would write to her all the time. Like, he would make, I mean, I'm stepping forward a little bit, but like later on we find out that he doesn't really sleep very much. Like, he slept for like about 4 hours on average a night, because part of that was because, he is so obsessive and fanatical about like being the best at, being the best general that he can be, and a bunch of other stuff. But one of the things he always did during that time was write to Josephine every day. Wild. Did not deserve it. He should have sent them to me.
What would you have done?
I don't know. I would have not shown him to all my friends and made fun of him.
Me either, man.
I would have been like, oh, that's nice. Thanks, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah. But alas, Napoleon goes to war with the Austrians, and
Jeez, which time?
Yeah, true. The first time. And what happens is he goes to basically reinforce a large group of really demoralized troops. The French were not getting the good end of the stick so far in this war. And there wasn't a lot of hope that Napoleon would really help all that much when he first got there.
Zero
However,
hope.
That quickly changed.
Okay, really, really quick. Sorry to interrupt.
Ball me, Blazer.
I think this is a good part for us to mention. Napoleon was involved in a ton of battles. We are going to do our best to give you the synopsis of the big ones, and especially the fun parts of all the big ones, and the things that we believe shaped him as a person, as a general, as a figure in history. But that in no way means we are going to go through the literal 40 battles that he was in, where he did spectacular things or not so spectacular things in each of them. So forgive us if we jump around a little bit. Forgive us if we come back to some stuff. This is a lot of information, and we're trying not to overwhelm. We're trying to make it as digestible as possible.
Yeah, we're definitely not going to microscope a lot of stuff. Even as far as tactics go, we'll probably won't get into that as much as we did with Hannibal or a lot of the other people that we've done, because there's so much information on Napoleon.
And if you guys want a pod where we just go ham into the actual tactics of things, I mean, Alan, I can't speak for you, but that would be fun as heck.
No, I'm super down.
So, I mean, let us know if that's something that we're, you're really interested in and it's worth a pod. Maybe we do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, you were about to talk about his first battle and how much his commanders and generals didn't respect him, and they thought he got his position from his girlfriend, wife.
Yes. So when he gets there, he completely redefines the fighting style of that time period. Essentially, what would happen is, if you know anything about the American Revolution or really war during that era, what would happen is they would do a lot of line battles, which was extremely gentlemanly, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And people would line up and they would shoot each other. Like, okay, I'm going to shoot you, then you shoot me.
Stupidest thing you've ever heard. I was reading that too, and I'm like, okay, so they just had a gentleman's agreement that they would walk up in a line, shoot their gun, then, slap the next guy on the butt and have him do the same thing, and then just rinse and repeat until everyone's dead? Like, what?
Yeah. And to be fair, I'm sure it was a lot more dynamic than that, but
sure, yeah.
Napoleon took it to a whole nother level. He would often divide his enemy and then take them out piece by piece. In fact, one of Piedmont's generals is quoted as saying, "They sent a young madman who would attack from left, right, and from the rear. It is an intolerable way of making war." So basically,
You getting in on my quote game now?
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that one of your quotes?
No, I wrote it down, but I don't know if I was going to
I
mention
like the quotes, man.
The quotes are sick. Okay,
sad.
Listen to this quote. This was previous to this one. I was going to sprinkle it in at some point, but this is what he said. This is one of his generals when he came onto that first battlefield. This literally made me laugh out loud. He's like his own general who knows nothing about Napoleon, but pretty, he has before he met him, he didn't really have a strong opinion about him, and he thought that he would probably be a pushover and be a terrible general and blah, blah, blah. But he meets him and he says this sentence. He says, "I don't know why. I really don't. But this little bastard scares me."
I had that quote written down too. I loved it. It's so good.
It just perfectly personifies Napoleon and what he was like once he stepped foot on a battlefield, let's say. People had the utmost respect for him for honestly sometimes confusing reasons. Like you ever just have those people in your life that you're just like, that just transcend logic, and you're just like, I don't know why, but I trust this guy. Like I think he's the one, you know? I think a lot of people felt that, and it's so funny to just think that this general is like, but this little bastard scares me.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's easily one of my favorite quotes. So now another thing to be noted, almost all of Napoleon's battles, he is at a numbers disadvantage. I mean, like at least half, 3/4 around there. Really more than anyone else that we kind of discussed.
Yeah, at least for the first, like, I want to say 70%, you know, maybe that's too big, but like the first good chunk of his battles, he's like almost always at least 2-1. Yeah.
Definitely. And so what he does, he's basically fighting two armies when he gets to Italy. And it's the Austrians and then an army led by Piedmont. I think I'm getting that right.
No, yeah, that's right.
And so he takes out Piedmont's army first before they can meet up with the Austrians, and then he goes and takes out the Austrians. And kind of something...
Then the Austrians suffer their first slapdown of many slapdowns.
Oh, yeah. He bodied the Austrians left and right. Absolutely. And what he would do, which I didn't know, is he would plant trees a lot of times when he would conquer territories. He would call them trees of liberty. But I thought, oh, that's cute. He's like got a little bit of hippie in him.
Yeah, he like leaned into the whole liberty thing. I mean, until the very, very end. He leaned into it all the way, man. Like he thought...
Yep.
You know, whether he was or not, he thought of himself as like somebody just literally walking around Europe liberating giant groups of people. That's what he thought.
Right. And the irony is all of Europe hated his guts.
Right. Right. And he wasn't really liberating many.
No.
Yeah.
And really, the main plot line throughout his entire
more
story arc,
liberating, but
yeah, that too. But really, France is just at war with everyone and everything during his entire life.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know a lot about French history or just European. I don't know a lot about history in general. Okay, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
You know the meme with France about how they're weenies and they're waving the white flag. Where does that come from? These guys are savages. Like,
they are.
Like these were. Like in this time, like the French army was like the most feared, grizzled, veteran force that Europe, maybe the world, like had seen up to that point. Like these guys were scary as hell.
Yeah, honestly, they mirror a lot of what Germany did in the 1900s, France did in the 1800s, and I basically, because the whole world was against them, I wonder if maybe there was some of that similar hatred that I'm sure Germans experience in the, again, early to mid 1900s.
What happened then in the early to mid 1900s?
Oh, World War II, Ryan. And World War One.
Oh. Were the Germans the bad guys?
They were the bad guys.
Oh, okay.
And I think the French were the bad guys in the 1800s. Okay. So basically he secured an armistice with Austria, and they paid him and his troops boatloads of money, which made his troops absolutely adore him.
First time that they got paid in maybe forever.
Yep.
Now,
Napoleon immediately looked to where he could go next. And Napoleon hated Great Britain. Absolutely hated the British. If you know anything about the British and the French, it's still rocky. And it's been rocky since
it's been rocky for
the beginning of time.
Years.
Yep. So he concocts a plan. Rather than invading Britain himself and doing any of that, because it would have been very, very difficult, he decided to cripple Britain's trade. And so what he did is he went to Egypt.
Naturally.
And he fought with their allies, the Ottoman Turks.
Oh, this battle cracked me up too.
They declared a jihad against him. Now, I don't have a ton about the battles, but basically, so if you want to take the reins here, go for it.
Yeah, there was the one big one, the Battle of the Pyramids. So that's where there was that they fought on. I can't remember if they were called Mamelukes or the things they fought on were Mamelukes.
So Mamelukes are like a unit.
Okay, so they're a unit. So there was a Mameluke prince, and he called Napoleon's men donkey boys.
Honestly, the British and the Ottomans just verbally abuse the French.
That's like their thing, man.
Especially the British.
Honestly, a lot of people verbally abuse the French.
They do.
They were funny, though. I was cracking up.
The British quotes cracked me up.
Yeah, and the British cartoons that you see later on, also super funny, too. If you get a chance to go look at, like, British cartoons from when Napoleon was in power, they made some really funny stuff. But anyway, he calls them donkey boys, right? And then he proceeds to lose 5,000 men while the French lose 30 in about an hour. And that was the Battle of the Pyramids. And I want you to know there's a very crucial thing why they lost that battle so poorly. It's because they had guns, and they did not. And the Mamelukes did not. They had swords and horses. And if we've learned anything from Genghis Khan, if you learn anything from Oda Nobunaga, it's that if you have guns and they have horses, guns greater than horses. So the Donkey Boys, they won. They won that battle very handily. And a big tactic of Napoleon's throughout history, and that really started here in Egypt, was propaganda. He was sending information back to France, back home. He was sending paintings, pictures of these victories and stuff like that onto home, whether they were having them or not. He was sending that all back home. So the French are hyped. They're like, this guy is hype. He goes to Egypt and he just gets it done. He goes anywhere and he just gets it done. So that was the Battle of the Pyramids. Not much to talk about. It was an absolute bloodbath. And he pretty much led his army into Cairo after that.
Yeah, and a quick kind of side note about the Ottomans. They definitely had the capability and were able to use gunpowder. They just happened to not have much in that battle, and Napoleon really took advantage of it.
Yeah.
And as far as propaganda goes, that's a really good point, because what Napoleon would also do is he would create his own propaganda and make sure that he spread it back in France.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And another thing that happens while he was in Egypt, which he ended up being really sad about, is the English Navy continuously bodied him throughout his life. It was probably one of, if not the biggest thorns in his side.
The British Navy just slapped, man.
Yeah.
There was like that one admiral too. I can't remember his name. He dies later on, but he was a huge part of their domination during the early part of Napoleon's life. And you're about to talk about when they just rolled by Egypt and decimated the entire French fleet while Napoleon's like on land. They did a quick drive-by, destroyed all of their boats. So then Napoleon's sitting there going like, okay, I have 35,000 men and we're Egyptians now. Hey.
Yeah, so he has to stay there for a year, and this entire time he is commiserating with his beloved Josephine, who is returning none of his letters.
Who's just buying houses and banging dudes, living the high life back home.
Exactly. Yeah. And lo and behold, he finds out that she has cheated on him.
Yep.
Many, many times with many, many people.
Oh, God.
And he ends up commiserating with his brother about it. And
I wonder if you're about to say what I'm thinking right now.
It is. So what happens is the good old Brits intercept one of the letters where he's discussing the affairs and how embarrassed he is and all that stuff. And the Brits are like, that's funny. Let's put it in our newspaper.
God, poor Napoleon.
Poor guy. I actually feel really bad for him.
Yeah, because he just wanted somebody to love, you know? Like, even when he was young, you know, you got that feeling that he was just, like, a hopeless romantic. And when he found Josephine, you knew he was, like, really into her. And Josephine just was not into him at all.
Yeah, and I'm no poet, but if you read the stuff, it's actually, like, kind of pretty and, like, really heartfelt and thoughtful.
It's super sweet. I mean, I didn't want to, but I was forced to listen and to read to many of the notes because they were so frequent in history.
It was cheesy though.
Yeah, it was super cheesy. But
probably for
I
the
actually
time.
read too that like when he found out about all this and his wife cheating on him, he took one of his general's wives as a mistress.
Oh yeah, he took a ton of mistresses after he found out, and
he
would not see her.
I'm just imagining like that conversation in like a tent or something. And they're just like, he's like, hey, just found out Josephine's cheating on me. And he's like, oh, man, I'm so sorry. And he's like, I'm going to need your wife. And he's just like, yeah, no worries, man. All good.
I did not know that. That's also really
Well, I
sad.
mean, this didn't happen. I'm just saying this is what's going on in my brain.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just,
but-
like, we know he took one of his
still.
general's wives as a mistress. So we know that happened. But
But still, it's like the two wrongs don't make a right, you know? Why would
Right.
you do that to your boy?
this time
know how bad
period
it
was
makes you
ass
feel?
backwards. if
It
you ask
was.
me. Yeah.
So, Napoleon finally returns home, and he refuses
Wait,
to
really quick. There's some cool stuff that came out of Egypt. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, you're good. Go for it.
Like, a big part of why we know about Egypt's history right now is because of the scientists that were traveling with Napoleon in that
that's
foreign
right.
land. So, like, they would measure things and they would find different, like, animals and, like, stuff. Like, Egypt, like, at this time it may have as well have been, like, Mars. Like, and if you know anything about Egyptian culture, like, it's, I don't want to say weird because I don't want to be offensive, but it's different. It's, like, very different.
Sure.
Comparative to like the way that the British or the French or just Europeans function in general. Like, this is some weird stuff. They have different technology. They believe in like different gods. Their religion's weird and different. It's like alien to them. So the fact that Napoleon was there for so long led to a lot of interesting scientific discovery that was brought back to Europe, and just learn more about like Egyptian history and like Middle East stuff.
Well, not only that, but Napoleon understood the value of a lot of things like art, engineering, science, all that stuff, which, if you know anything about the pyramids, mathematically speaking, they're genuinely insane as far as their construction, development, design, like all that stuff.
Still haven't figured it out. Like,
Right.
How to fully utilize it the way that they knew already, 350 years ago.
Yeah, and so when he originally went there, he brought with him 500 artists, engineers, and scientists. And one of the primary purposes that he went to Egypt was to learn, really. Napoleon loved learning. So definitely good catch, Ryan. I'm glad we talked about that.
Yeah, I just thought that was cool. I these kinds of generals you talk about, like all the fighting and stuff, it's nice to break it up with some different stuff every once in a while.
Yep.
Anyway,
definitely.
we could talk about Napoleon's straight bailing in the middle of the night on all of his men now.
Oh, wait, I didn't know he did that.
Yeah, he bailed in the middle of the night in secret, and he left a note.
Wait, what? In Egypt?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you got to tell the story because I actually didn't even hear
That's
about
the
it.
story.
Oh.
He wanted to go back home. It was in the middle of the night. He didn't want to
All right.
face all of his men, letting them know, hey, you 35,000, chill. Get back when you can. I'm going to head back on this private ship. All good?
What happened to the men?
They got back eventually. Some of them kind of. Others just stayed and lived in Egypt.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
But so once Napoleon gets back, at this point, Josephine is sad, I suppose, about her
This relationship is so
transgressions.
confusing, dude.
I
They're the
cannot
roller
stand her.
coasterist.
She is awful.
relationship. Yeah, she's the worst.
And so she begs Napoleon to take her back, and he's like, no way, don't talk to me. But then after a little bit, he accepts and he takes her back.
Oh, it's also important to mention that when he got back, because of all that propaganda that he spread in Europe, and really they consider what happened in Egypt now as a military disaster, because there were so many men stranded and they lost their way back home and they stayed there longer than they should. But the French thought it was a huge success. They were like, oh, he went to Egypt, and he's back. And there was a huge celebration. And most of it was because of the propaganda, because they didn't know what really shook down, because they weren't taking videos back then. So all they had was just the news that traveled back and forth.
And so Napoleon gets back, but he goes, all right, on one condition, I'm taking a lot of mistresses. And he's big famous now, so his inability to be charismatic with the ladies is less of an issue for him.
Matters not now.
Yeah. So now, important note that in France, when he gets back, there is still a ton of turmoil. And eventually Napoleon's like, all right, enough. And he stages a coup, and he takes control of the government himself without ever firing a shot. Now, when this happens, he is declared the consul of France.
Yeah, the
I
first
think I'm
consul.
saying that right.
Yep.
And
At 30. He's 30, by
Yeah,
the way,
at
right
30.
now, everybody. 30 years old.
just a youngin' still.
Yep.
And actually, he did some really cool things politically, and he was a super successful politician. A lot of the people really enjoyed.
I think that's what he did the best, honestly.
Probably.
Like, he was a massively successful, just a government employee.
Yeah, definitely. He streamlined a lot of the government practices, and especially the military, created a national bank, and resolved a lot of France's financial issues that they were experiencing.
Completely rewrote the Constitution. He did tons of stuff.
And the coolest thing I thought was he actually wrote an entire set of civil laws.
Yeah, he did, and he took it with him wherever he went, too.
Yep, and he also had a bit of religious reform where he reopened all the churches that were actually banned during the Revolution. So he was pretty progressively minded, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like, what he did for France's economy would literally ripple for, decades after that, or a decade after that. I mean, he organized state secondary schools. He established the first Bank of France. This was like he took France from like complete prosperity from the depths of hell into high regard in Europe. So this was a huge deal. Like, the political and economic and legal reform that he laid basically a really nice foundation with is not something to be ignored, and was very, very impressive.
Definitely. But alas, war called again, and he went back to Italy.
Which one?
And
Britain or Austria this time?
So I don't know. I know it was in Italy.
It was
again.
the Austrians. Yeah.
I think it was the Austrians, definitely.
Because it was at Marengo next, right?
Yep, Marengo.
Okay, this is where he took the Hannibal thing.
Yes.
This is where
if
he
you
took...
want to take it, I don't have any of the details of the
battle.
battle
So in spring
itself.
1800, he took 40,000 men, including his artillery, through the Alps. And if that sounds familiar, that's because you listened to our very first episode on Hannibal. No one had done this since Hannibal. Like, literally. It's just Hannibal and Napoleon. That's it. No one else is psychotic enough to take all of their people through a frozen tundra mountain wasteland for no reason other than to flank someone. Like, that's it.
Yep.
And it worked, like it always does. Why don't more people do this?
Because it's super dangerous.
It is super dangerous, and people die and stuff. But there were no elephants this time, thankfully. So Hannibal just lost human life, so we're good.
But artillery was the
heavy.
Yeah, very heavy, and kind of the elephant equivalent in this case. But
and there's a really famous picture, by the way. Like, if you've seen a picture of Napoleon, it's most likely this picture where he's like on this white horse with this blonde mane, and it's like galloping, or it's like it's neighing. What's that thing called when they go on their rear feet?
Whinnying.
Whinnying.
No, that's not whinnying. I don't
know
know
what I'm talking about
when they go on their
you know what I'm talking about
on their rear hooves. I just pictured a horse with feet when you said that. It like creeped me out.
So it's depicted that he made this trek across the Alps on this like glorious, majestic, huge horse in like full gear, looking super badass. But in history, it's written by him specifically. He crossed using a sure-footed mule in a bunch of cold weather gear. So that was more of the propaganda machine that he was building to make it seem like, he was this thing that was larger than life, that he was, he took his badass horse and they're, traveling through the Alps. It's like, in reality, it was not as pretty as, wasn't as pretty as they make it seem in the pictures. But to get to the battle, so June 14th, he faced the Austrians at Marengo, which was about, you said it was close to Milan. It was like 45 miles from Milan.
Yes.
And basically there was a battle, and by the end of the day, just because of the flanking maneuvers and just the, he's a better strategist than any other general out there. There were 6,000 French casualties and about double that Austrian casualties, so about 12,000.
Mm-hmm. And there was also a battle around this time where the Austrians kind of managed to use some of his own tactics against him, where he got ambushed by them and ended up having to fight them at half strength, and he kind of barely won the battle by the skin of his teeth. It ended up coming down to like a cavalry charge. But the way that he painted it to the French public was that it was like a total victory, just absolutely destroyed them, which they definitely won overall, but it wasn't quite to the effect that Napoleon described.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of this news, like, keep in mind, was traveling to more than just France. A lot of this news and this propaganda also spread to some of the places that he was invading. You know what I mean? So that would really decrease morale from the countries and things like that when, you know, they hear, even if it's not true, and they find out later that you know, that I was about to say Hannibal, that Napoleon's just rolling through their, you know, their army and stuff. But that led to a peace treaty between Austria and France, right?
Another one.
Yep. And then also Britain followed the year after.
Yep.
And for the first time in over a decade, Europe's at peace within the first 6 months of Napoleon's reign. And they're like, this guy's the shit.
Yep. So he goes back to France, and they're like, you know what? We like you a lot. You're going to be consul for life. Yeah. So the Pope comes down. They have a big old party. And the Pope's about to place a crown on his head. And Napoleon grabs it, and he's like, consul for life? Nah, you mean king. Emperor. And he places the crown on his own head.
Yep.
And then he crowns Josephine as his empress. And then everyone's like, all right, that's pretty chill. Except for half the people who hate him for it. So kind of divisive, but really overall they're like, you know what? He's done a lot of good. So
yeah, and he was the you know, Joe every guy in a lot of these situations. So he established like the equality of, you know, it's every man against the law. And what I mean by that is like, you know, he took the rebellion side of things where it was like, okay, it's not your nobility that reflects like what job you have and like where your standing is. It's like, you know, how good you are at your thing, and everyone should be treated equally in that respect. And most of the like feudal privileges that he abolished and like the equality stuff that he did, it remains like the basis of French law right now. Like right now, they still use it, they still say it. And then he signed also the Concordat, right, in 1801 with the Pope. And he is like publicly stated as saying like he didn't care about religion and he didn't really understand it, but he totally understood the political gains that he got from it. So he absolutely played the game throughout his life.
Yep, definitely. Now, during this time of peace, Napoleon still hates the British.
Naturally.
So he's concocting ways to invade the island of Great Britain. And there are actually some interesting things that he considers. One of them is tunneling under the channel. And it's touted as the first time that anyone decided to do that, which is ironic because now we have the channel.
Yeah. So, also, this is that time where like, oh wait, we should do a quick age check. He's 35. Yep. He's a 35-year-old emperor of France right now. 500,000 people came to his ceremony. It's crazy. Pope was there. It was wild. So this is when like that propaganda machine and like this is when we were talking about the British cartoons and stuff really started to ramp up. You should really go check them out. They're so funny. They called him the Bony Man.
Yes.
And I thought that was hilarious. And it's very well illustrated in their comics. So please go check it out. It's hilarious. This is where they call his wife a tart. That whole thing.
Yep, definitely. And another, jumping back to kind of some of his loony ideas, he also thinks about putting his men in hot air balloons and ferrying them over the channel. Now,
that's the
what
dumbest thing I've
spurs all of these ideas, the kind of driving force behind them is he realizes that he cannot defeat the British Navy. So he's trying to figure out ways to bypass them.
You can't go in the water.
Right. Yeah. But as this is going down, because, as Ryan was just talking about, Britain's propaganda machine was top tier.
So good.
They actually convince the Austrians and the Russians to invade French territory. So Napoleon's like, we've been over this before. Why are we doing this again? But he has to go to war with Austria, but also this time Russia. And I'm going to speed run this war.
Okay.
And really the
before
big stuff.
Before we go into the speed run of the war, I think that's a really good idea. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, not a big one here, but just the charisma of Napoleon as a general. I think that it's important before we get into some of these battles that you understand how effing good this man was at rallying his troops. Maybe the best we've ever seen. Maybe the best ever. Important. Something about him and the way that he was able to speak to his troops inspired people like nothing you have ever seen. And one of the specific things that happened that I wrote down was at one point he walked up to one of his generals and he asked, "Who's the bravest man in this army?" And he pointed at just some guy, like one of their people. And he had this thing called the Legion of Honor, which was basically like what's the thing? in American culture right now? Medal of Honor is
Medal of Honor is a medal, but do you mean like the Secret Service?
no. Like it was like a little pin, like a medal, like that.
Oh, okay,
So
okay, yeah. Medal of
he
Honor.
asked him who the bravest guy was he pointed at a guy, and he took the Legion of Honor, which was the highest pin that you could get in his army, and he put it on the guy, and he just like, patted his head and basically said, I love you, you're the best. And like, if you can imagine what that did for like their morale and their belief in this guy, he took the most valuable pin off of himself. It was his, and he put it on the bravest man. And like, how that would affect soldiers and morale and stuff. Like he did stuff like that all the time to get people riled up, to get them like, these guys were almost drunk with his charisma. Like they just wanted to run
Definitely
full speed and die in his honor. They were just ready.
Right, and they respected him because he definitely wasn't afraid to die either. So definitely really cool. It was definitely described in some of the battles that he would go charging into a battle with literal bullets whizzing past him and hitting people right beside him.
Yeah,
because muskets aren't particularly accurate, so I'm sure a lot of people were aiming for Napoleon and just hitting the people right next.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about like through history and a lot of articles about Napoleon's luck, and he himself is quoted a lot, honestly, talking about luck. And I have to believe that there's some sort of cosmic luck that this guy had through the first 40 years of his life. That it's crazy.
I think a lot of these commanders, I thought the same thing with Nobunaga as well.
Yeah. Yep, I definitely did too, with a couple of these generals. And then the last thing I wanted to say was I just wanted to give one more Ryan's quote time about Napoleon's battle strategy. So this was a quote from a general that fought him. And just so you understand like how annoying really he was. He said, he attacks every day. He attacks in the day. He attacks when it snows. He attacks when it's cold. It's not the way the game's been played. He looks for enemy fights, and when they assume he's going to stop, he continues. Then he wakes up the next day and fights again. So like, he's just berating people. His men are willing to go further, to travel longer, to forage along the way if it means they can make up time instead of eating, and stopping. And like, this army at this point is just built different.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And Napoleon is,
and he's
as well.
built different too. So they're all. So go ahead. I'm sorry, that was way longer than.
No, you're good. I'm just gonna do a quick speed run. Basically, Napoleon is fighting two armies, the Austrians and the Russians. And so what he does is he goes to meet them, and he actually captures a gigantic Austrian army. And when I say gigantic, I mean 70,000 Austrian soldiers.
Whew.
Without firing a shot after they were encamped in a city. Just insane. So he's like, okay, Austrians are done. Time to go face the Russians. And now the Russians were a little bit more of a doozy, but he pulls off another really crazy military maneuver and uses some of Genghis's tactics.
Was this the Battle of the
retreat.
Three Emperors?
That I can't remember.
Or the Battle of Austerlitz? Was this this one?
Yeah, this is Austerlitz.
Okay. So this is the one with the fog?
Yep, the one with the fog where he pulls back and the cavalry charge him, and as he's feigning retreat, they turn around and they start fighting the cavalry, and he moves the other portion of his army in between them, again segmenting them off so that he can take on smaller.
I've read that they literally
at a
came
time.
out of the fog and just scared the living crap out of this Russian army, and they got absolutely decimated because of it. They were able to get the tactical advantage on what side it was, and another testament to him outsmarting the other generals. And that czar from Russia was like kind of young, if I remember.
He was,
and he was pretty, as young people are, a little less wise and a little more brash and a little more go. So he maybe didn't think it through.
Now, as much success as Napoleon is having on land, the French get bodied on the water again. The British do another drive-by.
Yeah.
And the admiral who Ryan was talking about, I should have got his name, who was so successful, he actually ended up dying in this battle, but he absolutely crippled the French fleet at this point. And really is touted as the commander who really made it so that Napoleon just absolutely could not invade
Can you even imagine
England.
if this guy didn't exist? Like,
I think the French would have had a good chance at genuinely invading
I think
England.
we'd all be France at this point.
It's definitely
This would be
possible.
like North France instead of North America. Yeah. God knows what would have happened.
No, definitely. I mean, I really should have gotten his name. But he cripples the French fleet completely this time. I mean, he'd already done it about halfway, and he just went the full way.
He's just spawn camping him. He's just spawn camping him. He's like, hey,
Absolutely.
go ahead, take 6 months, build up like 20 more ships. I'll just blow them to the water as soon as you get them out. Cool.
Yep.
See you
And
in
this
6
really
months.
gets under this really gets under Napoleon's skin. What he ends up doing is one of the dumbest things that he actually does throughout his whole career. There's not very many dumb things that he does. There's like 2, maybe 3. And he puts an embargo on all British goods, which by this time he's pretty much in control of the majority of continental Europe.
Yeah.
And so what he has to do is convince the Tsar of Russia, whom he just defeated, to do the same thing.
It made everybody make a choice that probably wasn't an easy choice for any leader to make, where it meant sacrificing their economy for
Yep.
I guess like safety in a way, or I'm not really sure the decision behind that. Like, I get it. Like, his hatred for Britain was so great that he thought the fear he instilled in the nations that he attacked could prevent them from succeeding. But people still did it. Like, they did it behind his back. They did it despite him. They did it anyway because they needed to continue to function. Like, their economy needed to keep going.
Right. And the other reason it was dumb, there's a couple more reasons. One being trade works both ways. So if you're going to say you're going to do this embargo, or we're going to stop trading with you, then it's like, okay, well, you're also crippling yourself at that point to a degree. And it's not really a smart idea to put an embargo on someone who has naval control at the time. It's like,
what are
well,
you gonna
okay,
do
how
to-
are you really going to enforce that?
Yeah, exactly. One other thing about Prussia, because like Prussia's army, like to Napoleon up to this point, was like a little bit of a joke. And I have another quote that Napoleon said about the Prussian army that I thought was telling of how he felt. He said, "The idea that Prussia could take the field with me by herself," he said, "seems so ridiculous that it does not merit discussion." So he thought so little of the Prussian generals and the Prussian army. And like you said, he took like 140,000 prisoners and killed like 25,000 of them.
Yep.
And that all happened in like 3 weeks or something. It was embarrassing, to be perfectly frank. And then he did the blockade, like you're saying. Sorry, I'm just making sure we're hitting.
No,
hitting the big
you're
boys.
good. You're good. There's a lot to cover with
Yeah.
it. And just for clarification, Prussian is a bit of an outdated term. Basically, it's modern day Germany.
Correct.
So,
Yep. Austria and Germany. That's pretty much what we're talking about. Austria, Germany, and Great Britain. Yeah, and at this time he's got a massive empire. After this Prussian thing, like
Yep.
70 million people he's ruling over. Like, this is the biggest empire since the days of Rome. And he's got a
Yes.
huge ego
Well,
at this point.
in Europe.
Sure, in Europe. Yeah, yeah.
Except- yeah.
Talking European history here.
Just strictly Europe, yeah, for sure. And so now after these couple of wars, he has another little reprieve and he decides to go back, and he's like, man, I really need an heir. Now, Josephine
Josephine.
cannot provide him with an heir.
Don't
For
you
some reason or
say.
another.
Probably all the
she just
STDs for
can't.
her being so scandalous.
I would not be surprised. But
Damn it.
so what happens is he finally divorces her. Finally, and at this
He
point
didn't even want
she
to.
is. No, he didn't even really
No,
want
he
to.
like
Probably
literally
wouldn't
didn't
have.
want to. If she could give him a kid,
Yeah.
he would not have 100%. I do not know why this man was obsessed with Josephine, but he was. Even after the divorce, like, and it was just a thing he knew he had to do because he needed a spawn.
Yep.
Even after the divorce, it said the next day he went to her house and it was like pouring rain, and they just walked around in the rain holding hands all day.
Dude, that's so. Don't quit bringing me down. Don't.
I'm not bringing you
don't
down.
say
This
facts
guy
like
was just
that
a
on here.
hopeless romantic. All he wanted was
That's
some
so
love.
sad.
That's all he wanted.
All right, I'm moving on. So, you'll make me cry. So Now, Napoleon's bodied the Austrians so hard by this point that he just takes one of their nobility. I think it was like an Austrian princess. He's like, you know what? Get over here.
It was. He did body them several times. It was like
He didn't take her.
It was a really who was it? It was like a super famous family that he married into.
Yeah, it was like lineage from the Austrian like emperor or king or something. I forget.
Yeah, and it was her daughter.
Is,
she was like 19. Because at this point he was quoted as saying he wants to marry a womb. That's what he said. He literally said, "I want to marry a womb." So on April 2nd, he got married to the Archduchess Marie Louise or something.
Yes, is Marie Louise.
Yeah.
And she gives him an heir.
Yeah. A year later, boom. Austria and France are allied. He's got a wife that's Austrian. He's got a son. Things are going okay. I mean, good.
Yes. And a lot of people are hating him during this time. So about this time, he's also foiling multiple assassination attempts.
Naturally.
So there was some by, I believe it was, I don't know what, one of them was called the Conspiration of De Punyad.
Oh, there's a bunch. I mean, he's the most famous person in Europe, literally.
Royalists didn't like him. Catholics didn't particularly like him. He was not well liked by a lot of people, loved by his troops and a lot of France.
Super divisive guy.
Now, he does another dumb thing not long after this.
Yeah.
And he decides to
do with
invade Russia. Oh, you wanna cut in before we jump to the invasion of Russia?
No. We could talk about Russia. I thought we were about to talk about your people, but we'll get there.
I don't have much on the Spaniards. Maybe I'm just still salty.
Oh, I've got a little
jump
bit.
In and do the Spaniard
I've got a little
stuff.
bit because the Spaniards were honestly the first time that I really felt like just going through all this. Like they were the first one that gave him like a gut check. And It was a little bit before the Russian thing, so let me.
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah, so like he's got a huge ego, let's say, right now.
Oh, for sure.
And he's like,
he would cheat at chess, and people would just let him because he was so obsessed with winning.
Yeah, so his ego's out of control at this point, and to him, he's like, I'm gonna go liberate Spain, right? He's like, I'm gonna liberate them. And he couldn't imagine that some people loved their country as much as he loved his own. And he was mad at Spain because Spain wasn't cooperating with the blockade and the trading with Britain, because Spain's like, who cares about you? Like, we're doing our own thing, right? Mm-hmm. And he thought Spain, and this is like a direct quote from him, he thought they were dominated by clergy who were illiterate, ignorant, and fanatical. He thought there would be no resistance whatsoever, and that could not have been different than what happened. It was like the most dirty, brutal, savage 5-year span for his army. Like, he could not break Spain's will. Like, he could not do it. He kept sending people, and the Spaniards, like, it wasn't like the wars that we talked about where they're like, all right, stand in a line and shoot your gun at me. You know what I mean? It was like people getting grabbed in the sewers and getting their heads chopped off and like thrown out into the yard. Like, it was like scary stuff. So he wasn't used to that kind of warfare. Actually, this is where the term guerrilla warfare started. I was reading that.
Is it really?
Yeah. From this shit right here. From Spain and Napoleon battling, and he couldn't break Spain. He didn't ever break Spain.
He did conquer a lot of the territory, but you're saying like the people weren't broken; they continued to fight.
No, no one ever surrendered, and most of Spain was intact at the end when he went to Russia. And he went to Russia with like what, 600,000? Like, it was some crazy amount of troops, right?
I don't think it was. I think it was like 200,000.
Dude, it was something. I mean,
I don't
whatever.
Remember,
even that's
honestly
insane.
It was touted as the biggest army, or one of the biggest armies that had ever been assembled at that time.
Yep.
So.
And he did that in retaliation of them not deciding to be in that blockade with Britain, correct?
Yes, because he had met with the Tsar and he thought they got along famously.
Right, they made out.
And, well, did they actually?
I'm just kidding, they didn't make out. But they were like bromancing hard. I got that vibe. He thought they were really close. The Tsar, is quoted as saying, Napoleon's a great leader, like all this good stuff about him. Napoleon was quoted as saying the Tsar was very handsome and, some other things like that. They were really buddy-buddy, or so it seemed.
Yeah, but apparently the Tsar really liked tea and crumpets because he's like, I am not doing the embargo thing. You can't make me. And Napoleon goes,
He just wanted his people to
you.
eat. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, Napoleon ends up invading Russia for it, which ends up being his downfall. Now, he does win a lot of the battles while he's invading Russia.
Yeah, the first big one, Battle of Borodino. That was the biggest
Borodino.
one. Or that was the first one. That's when, they won, you were about to say probably, like, barely.
Yeah, so I don't have much in the battle. I was going to speed run this one again, kind of. But if you want to get into it, go for it.
Oh, man, I feel like I'm taking so long. But I was so interested about all this. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's good.
The big part about this wasn't the battle. It's what happened afterward. So the Russians lost, right? But what they decided to do, which was honestly five-head as heck.
It was.
They burnt Moscow to the ground before Napoleon could really get there. Because...
And if I can cut in... Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say because it was about to become winter soon, and Napoleon's men were obviously planning on taking Moscow and winning. Because if they didn't win, they'd be dead. If they won, they'd be living in Moscow. But they burnt it to the ground so no one could live there.
Yeah. They burnt a lot of like really important stuff. And the reason that Napoleon wanted to go to Moscow, and he actually accomplished his original goal, is he thought that if he took Moscow, that the Tsar would actually surrender. But what happened was they took Moscow, and as like a sign of, no, we're not going to surrender, they did exactly what you said. Right. They deserted it, burned it. And so Napoleon sits there for, I think, like
3 weeks.
Yeah, like a month.
Yeah,
maybe.
Good amount of time. He did end up getting like a lot of the cultural stuff from Moscow. Like Moscow was a huge deal. Like it was a big city. There was no way they could get
a huge deal.
Yeah, there was no way they could get everything out of Moscow in time. So he did take a lot of wealth, let's say, art, stuff like that back from Moscow. But he had a problem because, we know now that winter was coming. Yeah, winter came early, and he sent his French soldiers home at that point because he didn't really have a choice because he didn't have anywhere to stay.
Right. They didn't have the supplies. They didn't have... They just couldn't winter there. Russians, born and bred there, they know their terrain. They know how to survive there. The French definitely did not. And so he actually loses. This is, from everything I read and watched, this was considered literally one of the biggest military blunders of all time.
Yep. Food ran out.
He lost like genuinely 90% of his army, I think.
Food ran out.
Actually
horses
crushed
died.
Him.
Men died by the thousands fighting over like horse meat. And plus the
cold, starvation, and attacks from the Russians all along the way.
Constantly. They were like, I compared them in my head to like a hyena waiting for its meal to die.
Yeah.
Like, it's just bleeding.
Hey, that's actually brutal.
Like, it's so true, but they kept like just eating at little pieces of them from the side, the back, the front, like everywhere, all the time. And they didn't have to win. They just had to wait.
Yep.
Which is crazy.
And they totally baited them with the whole Moscow
thing.
Just totally big
props
brain,
to them.
Like you said.
That was huge.
Yep. And so by what this did is it actually weakened France so much at this point that they're getting attacked by I think 5 different countries now.
They called themselves the Allied Forces at this point, and there was pretty much everyone we've talked about in this whole story up to this point that Napoleon pissed off is like, hey, he's weak now. Like, let's be done with this.
Yep, exactly. And it's at this point that the French people are like, okay, we loved you, but this is such a big mistake that we hate you.
We're all
now.
going to die.
Goodbye.
Yeah. So he renounces his throne, right? We're getting to that?
He does. And then he is so heartbroken because it seemed like he genuinely loved France and loved the French people. So I think this really, really cut him to the core. And obviously it did, because what he ends up doing is he tries to kill himself.
Yep. Poison.
He gets a poison concocted, and it supposedly has enough strength to kill 2 men. And what
Napoleon.
He does is he glugs it down, and his body rejects the poison. He just gets sick for a few days, and he lives.
Yeah, and a part of the reason he was so depressed and a lot of it was what you just said, king and country, but another part of it was his family, his only family that he had, his new wife and his baby, they had to go back to Russia. Or Austria, sorry. Woo, not Russia.
I didn't actually know.
Yeah, they did. He said goodbye to them and like sent them off to Austria because he knew things weren't going well, and this could be the end. You know, he was burning his private papers, like doing all this kinds of stuff. Once Allied forces started invading France.
Wow, I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, he thought it was over.
Yep. So he abdicates the throne, and what ends up happening is he gets exiled to a little island called Elba.
Yep.
And
that's where Idris Elba lived.
They allow for. Okay.
He was there.
Do not light.
He's a time lord. How old is Idris Elba right now? Say it out loud, everybody.
We do not have time.
He's between 18 and 57. Tell me.
That's true, actually. The man is timeless.
God, he's beautiful.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Sorry.
Go on. So, Elba is 18 miles wide, and what happens is he's allowed to keep his title as emperor, but it's more of like a mockery.
It's a super mockery. They have like 12,000 people at this island. They're just like, here, go be the emperor of Elba. No one cares.
Yeah, and 1,000 of them are like his men that are still loyal to him, basically. He's allowed to keep a standing army, a few cannons and things like that, but he is under constant like French and British watch. Mostly the British, because the British are like, we hate you a lot, Boney. And so he lives there for about 10 months, and he absolutely hates it. But yeah, going from Emperor of Europe to Emperor
70
of
million people
island.
to 12,000, a little bit of a jump there.
A little bit of a demotion, no doubt. So he's actually getting word back that people hate the new king that has replaced him. And so he concocts a little bit of a plan where his English parole officers, for lack of a better term, they go on holiday. They have to go to Italy for something. And he's like, I'm going back to France. So he does. And this is one of the coolest things that he did is he gets there, and the King of France learns that he's landed on French soil. And so he sends an army out to go defeat Napoleon. And now this army is obviously way bigger than Napoleon's 1,000 men. I mean, he's picking up people here and there who are still loyal to him. Yeah, but it's a lot of, like that.
Those guys.
Right. And so when this French army sees Napoleon, and obviously they're dwarfing his own army, he actually tells his men to just chill, and he walks out alone to go talk to he basically addresses the whole army. And he basically tells them, like, shoot me if you will. I don't care, but who do you really want to follow? And they immediately are like, you, dude. That's why I became here.
You are way cooler than that other guy.
Yeah. So they actually join his army, and he takes France back. So now when this happens, word gets out to all the enemies that are still furious in literally every other country in Europe. So the British finally decide, you know what, we're going to get involved.
At this point, this guy is like beyond a thorn, like in their side. Like they've tried to exiling him. They've tried like just what he was able to do in such a small amount of time, and getting like a good number of his army back from just nothing, from talking. They're like, this guy's too dangerous. We gotta do something about this.
Yep, they're absolutely terrified of him, and so there's a coalition of British and French forces that are marching towards France. And Napoleon decides either I can wait in Paris for them or I can go out. And he's like, I'm no bitch. I'm going out. He does
what he always does.
And so he decides to meet them. And so what he does is what he always does. He tries to stop the armies from converging and joining. And so he goes after the Prussians first. And he struggles a little bit to beat them, but he does end up beating them and pushes them back. But he doesn't crush them decisively enough that the army is like no more. So what happens was he kind of defeats them just barely by the skin of his teeth. And so he goes to try to defeat the British before they can kind of regroup and rejoin the battle and rejoin the British. And this is when he meets the Duke of Wellington.
The Duke of Wellington in the Battle of Waterloo.
Yes, the Battle of Waterloo occurs, and long story short, the French lose and Napoleon loses. But what happens is, ironically, going back to your quote that he had about the Prussians, is as he's really beating the British in this battle so far, but the Prussian cavalry is able to recover. Anyway, so the Prussian cavalry is able to recover from the previous battle, and they come to help the British and completely save them. And the Duke of Wellington uses their flanking maneuvers to push back the French. So, good old Duke of Wellington.
Yeah, that guy's overrated.
Defeats Boney. I kind of agree, but I do like that he called him Boney.
Yeah, definitely funny. British people are hilarious.
They are.
Yeah.
Basically, that is what happens, and Napoleon goes into exile yet again. But this time they're like, no army for you, no emperor title for you.
Yeah.
And you're going to be under constant watch, and you're going to be on an island that's way far away from France, like thousands of miles.
There's going to be boats circling the island 24/7.
Yep, and your house is going to be within watch of one of our military barracks, essentially. And the island is called St. Helena. And so he goes there, and he has this little cottage, and this is kind of where he starts to write his memoirs. He does some weird things there.
Gardens,
he cut holes in the blinds.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, he cut holes in the blinds so he could spy out of them without being seen. It's still there. They still have it as a display, it's a historical landmark, so you can go there and see. And there's these little holes in the blinds where they're like little peepholes, so to speak.
I imagine he was massively bored.
Oh, yeah, and I'm sure super paranoid.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he knows that he's living amongst people who despise him.
Right.
So, under constant British watch, writes his memoirs there, and he ended up dying on May 5th, 1821. 51 years old. They think it was most likely cancer. Some people say he was poisoned by the British. I don't buy it.
No,
it had an insane con score.
It was cancer, and they ended up actually taking some of his hair after his body was dug up in 2008 to confirm that it wasn't arsenic poisoning or something like that, and they confirmed that they're 99.9% sure it was specifically gastric cancer, but yeah, stomach cancer.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Makes sense. The man did not look like he had a good diet.
No, he was always holding his belly.
Yeah.
What every picture, dude. He's just got his hand in his shirt. Apparently it was a fad. No. Apparently it was an actual fad back then. Some people say they're like, oh, he was holding it because he had stomach cancer and his stomach was probably upset. I'm like, no. This guy didn't have stomach cancer for 30 years.
I don't know, man. His constitution, he might have.
You think he was constantly putting his hand on his stomach to settle it from the stomach cancer?
Look, Napoleon did some insane things. I wouldn't be that surprised.
Okay, well, if you guys can't tell, that's the end of Napoleon. We need to move on. That was an insane background. I hope you enjoyed it. Napoleon was a super duper cool dude.
Stat time.
It's stat time, though. More specifically, Alan, it is race, class, and background time.
That is true.
So, this is going to be a point of contention, I can already tell. I struggled like crazy with his race. I struggled like crazy. And what I settled on...
Until I didn't.
Until I didn't. Well, you go first. I always go first, and it sucks, and I listen to yours, and it's better. You go.
Okay, so I did dwarf.
Nope.
And I did dwarf not because of his height, which, by the way, we should discuss his height. He was
5'6".
likely about 5'6", which was only an inch
or two
smaller
below
than the national average. So he always gets painted as this really small guy with little man syndrome. Definitely had a little bit of little man syndrome, but
he had a chip on his shoulder. But I don't know that it was from necessarily his height. I think a lot of the little man comments actually stemmed from his age more than his height, because he was so young always.
I think so too.
And people of different countries that didn't know him and weren't a part of his army were like, "What? There's this 26-year-old dude leading commanding an army. He's just a little, just a little guy." So I think there's a misnomer there or two. But you went dwarf, yeah, go for it.
So what dwarves get is they get bonuses to Constitution, and they specifically get resistance to poison, which I thought was interesting. Huh. Now, dwarves are also tend to be known as being more technologically savvy and things like that, and I thought that really fit his.
But not as technologically savvy character. As another small race.
Okay, Balmy Blazer.
Gnome.
Ooh.
So this is why sold me on gnome. I literally was doing like this is the longest I've ever deliberated on a race. It usually just comes to me like that. But gnomes, so they speak as if they can't get the thoughts out of their head fast enough. So they live a long time, but honestly, they get anxiety like early on in their life that they're not going to, even in all the time that they're going to be alive, get enough of the things that they want done and the things that they want to do and see, right? So like another thing about gnomes, like for instance, I know this is tiny, but their hair is often like really unkempt and crazy. And the reason that they say their hair is like that is because gnomes can't decide which direction to go. And Napoleon's was constantly just like, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. And
we have the opposite problem. He's extremely decisive.
Yeah, but
his hair was often described as exactly the way that you're.
Yeah, but he would go all of those different places like in succession. He would never stop. He didn't waste any time. He wasn't just like chilling for any period of time. And like, he was to me like gnomey. He wasn't a human. He wasn't like.
I always think of gnomes as being really smart too, and Napoleon was like freakishly smart.
Yeah,
for sure.
Gnomes are really smart. They're often thought of as like inventors or like strategists, and like that's where gnomes, survive.
And you know what else?
In the smart.
Gnomes have a stigma, kind of like Napoleon had a stigma, where it's you look at him and you're like, what's this guy gonna do?
Right.
But a gnome who knows what they're doing can be a dangerous thing. Yeah. For sure.
And
so you know what?
Gnomes have an intel increase by 2 just for being a gnome. They're like smart. They're really smart.
And I gave him an item, spoiler alert, that can deal with the poison stuff anyway, so you sold me.
I did as well.
Okay, perfect.
It wasn't an item, actually. It's a spell. It's hilarious, and I can't wait to get to it. But anyway.
I feel like we're going to have some overlap here, but we'll have to see.
Yes, overlap for the first time. Okay. Class also struggled very hard with this. Napoleon was the hardest person for me to pigeonhole. I could not do it.
He was a bit of a struggle. He's a bit of an enigma. I think that's probably why. But I did Artificer.
Called Enigma? We should do that.
It's close. I did Artificer, what an Artificer is, for those of you who aren't super knowledgeable about D&D stuff, basically what they do is they're masters of invention. Artificers use ingenuity and magic to unlock extraordinary capabilities and objects. So unlike wizards where they kind of use some kind of mundane object, artificers could use things like, I don't know, cannons, guns, or really everyday objects and turn them magical. So there's also things where you get it's called Firearm Proficiency that all artificers get. And there's another one in here. I'm going to find it in a second. It's called Flash of Genius, where you've gained the ability to come up with solutions under pressure. When you or another creature can see within 30 feet, makes an ability check or saving throw, you can use your reaction to add your intelligence modifier to the roll. It's all about ingenuity and all that stuff, and I just thought it was super cool. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a really natural fit. I think for Napoleon, I think Artificer is really good. It makes a total amount of sense. I'm gonna make my argument for a multi-classing situation here.
Yeah, I'm on board.
So what I settled on was the College of Valor, which is a specific college for bards, because you know how bards go to college. You have colleges. The reason that he was a bard was because there was no one more inspiring than Napoleon. There was no one that could bring an army to their knees or make them jump in the air. There was no one who could do that. And specifically, bards in the College of Valor are those who keep like the memory alive of great heroes of the past and inspire a new generation of heroes. They meet in halls and bonfires and sing the deeds of the mighty in the past and the present. And they often travel great distances to different lands to witness great events firsthand and ensure that the memories of those events doesn't pass from the world, like through their songs and stuff like that.
So good.
So like, I just felt like that was a good fit for him because I do think that we need to. I want to say like the biggest part about him was how inspiring he was for his his troops and stuff. So I felt like
I love that.
Not having any bardy stuff was a little bit of a disservice to him. But an Artificer bard might be the most perfect fit we've ever had for somebody.
Yeah, I actually think so too.
Yeah.
Almost, Napoleon was so wild to me. I think he almost has a couple of rogue traits too, but I think Artificer Bard, we should probably leave it at that.
Yeah,
But I
he's
think
got
an
some
argument could
battle
also be
master
made for some rogue stuff. Yeah.
going on too. Some fighter for sure.
Yep. I love Artificer Bard though.
Yeah,
but
that's a cool
okay.
combo, man. I'm gonna steal that.
It is a cool combo.
I'm gonna steal that. Like, I'm gonna be that
It's
in
fun.
D&D at some point. That's really
No,
cool.
for sure.
What about background?
Okay, so background, I just did soldier. I thought it fit him.
I did Outlander. Mostly because of his childhood. I felt like he was that Outlander, living in a different country, not really feeling like he was a part of it.
Can I tell you why I hate it?
Yeah.
Because I feel like Outlander is all about your survival skills, and I feel like Napoleon's wisdom was garbo.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Sorry.
Soldier
Not to be mean.
Soldier definitely, no, it's not mean. Soldier definitely makes a lot of sense. He definitely was a soldier. He went to military school at 9, so it's tough to argue. Okay, yeah, that makes way more sense.
I just always think of Outlanders as being like wise. Maybe Hermit though. I feel like is similar.
No, he definitely wasn't a
yeah.
hermit.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, let's. It's cool. I changed it to soldier. That makes more sense. I'm willing to compromise when it makes sense, Alan.
Okay, that's fair. I could have worded it maybe not like a dick though.
Anyway, let's go to items and spells. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. How many items do you have?
1.
Okay, I'll go first then. So I'm gonna do my second one that doesn't have to do with poison, since you said yours has to do with poison.
It's my spell.
I'll do my other one
so
first.
it's after this.
Oh, okay,
so you can go with
perfect.
whatever.
So I have. It's called Corsican Cappuccino.
Ooh.
And you carry a flask of poison, the contents of which are deadly to all creatures but you.
Oh, that's cool.
Just nice, sweet, simple, probably really overpowered. What's your item?
My item is a food as well, or a drink. It's food. It's potatoes with fried onions.
I was not
might
expecting
seem
that.
random, but that is Napoleon's favorite meal to have on the campaign
Really?
trail. And then it allows Napoleon +1 to strength on any day he starts with this meal. Potatoes
Cool.
with fried onions. A little fun fact. There it is. That was his favorite.
Nice and simple. I like that. Now, I have one more. It's called the Bicorn of Battery. And what a bicorn is the type of hat that Napoleon wore.
Oh, I just
And the
pictured
reason-
corn. I'm glad you said that.
Wait,
I
what is
pictured
it?
him just holding a piece of corn, like a maze of corn.
Just 2 pieces
Yeah.
of corn. The
the
Bicorn,
bicorn,
of
2
Battery.
corns.
Yeah, so no, it's the type of hat that Napoleon wore that was really popular for military commanders of that time. But what it does is, when wearing this magical bicorn hat, deal bonus damage with all ranged attacks and spells. I gave him that because of his proficiency with artillery and things like that.
Makes sense.
So thought it fit.
People enjoyed his people in his army really enjoyed the way he dressed and stuff, because it was like similar to the way that they did, and it made them feel like, you know, he was one of them. So
One of the people, man.
that is cool. Any other items?
Nope, no other items, but I think we both have a lot of
Yeah, we
abilities.
both have 3 spells or abilities. I will do my poison one first so we can get it out of the way, because it's my favorite. Oh my god.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the name of this this ability is called I Took a Pill in Ibiza.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't know, Ibiza is in Spain.
It's an island, yeah.
Whatever.
but
It's technically classified as in Spain, okay?
yeah, Spain definitely.
So the reason that I took a pill in Ibiza, obviously there's the cultural reference, but also shortly after the stuff that happened in Spain is when Napoleon decided that he wanted to kill himself. You know, Spain, then Russia, then that. But the text behind that is Napoleon has a natural resistance to all poison damage, just
Nice.
a passive. So took a pill.
I think
in
he can
Ibiza.
have both too. Yeah.
Yeah, he can.
I
They're
like
not
that a
exactly
lot.
the same, but like we both liked that fun fact a lot, so I knew we were going to have
referenced
something
it in
about
Hannibal.
Yeah.
In the Hannibal.
You've referenced it in like 4 podcasts.
I don't know why.
You
It just
love it.
gets me, man.
Yeah. All right, what do you got?
Okay, so I have one of also my favorite abilities I've ever made. It's called Maca Flocka Flame.
Oh my god.
And so what it does,
Oh god, that's so good.
when any creature mocks you, you develop a bloodlust, dealing bonus damage equal to your intelligence and charisma modifiers.
Oh.
However, roll disadvantage on all saving throws, barring Constitution, for the rest of the day.
Oh, the rest of the day?
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of...
I think I did until
balanced.
the enemy was down. Until an enemy was down, but I made it to the rest of the day because it just seemed too open.
Yeah, I was gonna... If you did...
And I wanted... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a really good job of balancing. That's all I was going to say.
Well, and the reason I did it is because I wanted when someone plays it, I want their allies to be able to mock them, to buff them.
Wait, that's actually
Napoleon
so
got
sick.
bodied by his enemies and his allies.
Yeah.
His allies mocked him easily as much as his enemies did. They're like, this guy sucks. He
If
doesn't
this
know what
guy
he's
was
doing,
7
especially
feet tall,
early
he would have
career.
had little man syndrome with how much people made fun of him.
Oh,
Like,
for
yeah.
sure. For sure. And I just thought the juxtaposition of your allies just insulting you in battle would be hilarious.
Yeah, that creates a fun D&D situation. That's just great for the whole family. Okay, so my second ability was called Absolute Courage. Once per long rest, Napoleon can disappear and reappear exactly where he's needed most in a battle to regain a tactical advantage or support an ally.
Dude, that's sick.
Yeah, so it was often said when he would battle that he was always where he needed to be to make sure that his men and his people were in the right mindset and had the right support to succeed in any given moment. So I thought it would be cool to give him an ability called Absolute Courage, which is what he had. Guy had balls of steel.
Yeah, and just to kind of expand on that, he was known to go from camp to camp when they weren't in battle, and he was known to go from like regiment to regiment to really make sure that his troops' morale was just there all the time. And yeah, so really, I think that's an awesome ability.
Yeah, he was a great leader.
Now, my next ability is a passive.
Okay. 2 passives. Danger.
And it's another bit of a double-edged sword.
Okay.
It's just called Repulsive.
Loose skin.
Yeah, pretty much. So what it does is it actually negates all sneak attack damage against you.
Okay.
Additionally, your party cannot be ambushed. However, all charisma and wisdom throws against creatures of the opposite sex incur disadvantage.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's actually not as big of a debuff. That's more of a debuff to like social situations and like anything outside of battle, I guess.
For sure.
Yeah. Which
really
is accurate.
What I want it to be
Which is
he just loses his charisma modifier when talking to.
That's hilarious.
When trying to use charisma.
Wait,
mods
that's
against...
so good because his charisma's so high for other reasons, but he really sucked in that one way. That's like such a necessary evil.
I think I'm going to change it
to put on him.
Yeah.
That's so
I think
perfect.
that's a good passive for him.
That's so perfect. I love that.
So we'll update that on the character sheet, which we're gonna, I promise, put character sheets on the website here.
Yeah, we definitely will.
It's happening this week.
Okay, so my last ability. This is another one of my favorites. It's pretty cool, and it has to do with his ability to lead his men. It's called The Walking Dead.
Okay.
And it is when an ally within a 10-foot radius of Napoleon receives a death blow, they instead double their speed and attack for 1 turn and then perish forever.
Oh, damn.
So
that's sick, though.
Yeah, so like basically like The Walking Dead. Like he had a way of when people had their backs against the wall to end up prosperous somehow through, and if that meant throwing their body at another for the sake of success, they would do that. People would follow him into the darkness.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so
100%.
That is my last ability.
That's a really good one too. I really like that one. So my last one I got, it's like the opposite of Maca Flame. I got really like nerdy, sweaty. Just this one's, got
more nerdy and sweaty than your other
acne.
abilities. Holy shit! Okay,
so it's called. That's like the edgiest name ever. You ready? Yeah. It's like straight out of an anime. Yeah. Imperious Exile.
Oh gosh.
I hated saying that out loud.
All right, what does it do?
So, if you are separated from your party, gain 1 charge of mass message. This allows you to communicate 1 sentence telepathically to your party and can be used once per long rest.
That's really cool, though. Anybody who's played D&D knows send message or mass message or stuff like that can be really fun and a way to avoid metagaming and so that's cool. I like that. Adding a little bit of
very useful
communication, very important. Okay,
all right.
Skills.
Talent time.
Yeah, talents and skills. I kind of gave him
I have 4
crap load, dude. So you might have to.
I only give him 4.
You're gonna have to hone me in here.
Okay.
Insight? No, you probably didn't give him because that's wisdom. Perception.
Yeah, I gave him perception.
Deception.
Deception, I could see. I didn't give him deception though necessarily.
Intimidation.
I should have given him
performance and persuasion.
Yeah. So I gave him persuasion. I also gave him history because
you gotta give him performance, dude.
Wait. Oh yeah, you're right.
He
actually,
is
definitely for inspiration.
The best performer, and like, so the reason I gave him performance was because he had a way of like flipping a switch. He wasn't like a humorous guy. He didn't have like that social charisma that was just like he was fun to talk to, but he would flip a switch and become like Maximus from Gladiator at any second. Like, he was able to rally his troops at the flip of a switch. It was like a click in his mind. So to me, that's acting, that's performance, that's what that is.
Yo, 100%. I actually completely agree with that.
Okay, is persuasion the one we want to take off?
No. I agree. I think persuasion's huge.
Deception, was it?
Because Deception, I just wasn't sure of. I also added history as well, and Arcana, just because of the difference. Really, Arcana is kind of a hit or miss. I did it specifically because of the different types of things he would just put in cannons, depending on the situation. Huh. I thought it was kind of interesting, but I
think Arcana buffs him a
history
little
for sure,
much.
I think.
Like, for no reason.
I agree.
That area. But yeah, history
so
for sure.
I think history is a must.
Deception was kind of like a Hannibal kind of thing for me. Like deception as in like the way he used his people, like his army. He would use deception,
I could see it, actually.
Like with the battle with the fog and like the flanking and the going through the Alps. He was deceiving people on like a grand scale.
100% sold. Okay, so what was the end game that we have here? Because I only have 4 listed.
I think we're doing. So
you have history, persuasion, perception.
History, persuasion, perception, deception, intimidation, and performance. Yep.
Nice. Okay, I think that's solid. I think that fits him really well.
Okay.
What'd you give him for defense score?
I gave him 16. Did you go?
Yep, I gave him 15.
Okay. I mean, like,
I think
the guy did a lot of.
Sure.
I feel like he, like you said, like there was a lot of shots at him that didn't hit.
Yeah, honestly, I think the only reason I didn't give him a 16 is because of the dexterity and strength that I gave him.
Yeah.
Bit of a spoiler alert, but
right, and that scales off of dex, so maybe 15 smarter.
It can for certain classes.
Well,
yeah.
It definitely makes more logical sense. So let's go 15 for defense score, and then let's just talk about his strength and dexterity right now together. So
yeah, would you give him? I give him a 7
Ooh.
For strength. I went in.
Damn. Okay. So he's like negative for you.
People always described him as just kind of like wiry, but he's also like kind of pudgy. And so I think he was genuinely weaker
than average.
Than your average person.
Yeah, that's why I gave him a 9.
You should get a negative modifier.
I give him a 9 for strength, 10 for dex.
I give him a 7 for strength, 9 for dex. I think he should definitely have at least a -1 to strength.
Okay.
Personally.
I mean, that's fair. So what if we go 8 strength and meet in the middle on dex with a 9? That way he doesn't.
I give him a 9.
Oh. And I give him a 10.
I'm cool with giving him a 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the way that the ability modifiers work, 9 would be. I think 9 would be giving him a negative, right? Or was 9 0?
No.
8 to 9 0?
It's every oh yeah, it is a negative. You're right. Yeah, so I think 10. I don't think he necessarily needs a negative in dexterity unless you think he does.
No, I think that there's some things he did that were dexterous enough to be considered average.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Okay, now we get into the interesting stuff. What
the big boys.
What do you put for
Nat 20 con? You cannot convince me otherwise. Don't care. Don't want to hear it.
I put 22.
I think he is. I hope he's not the only Nat 20 we did, because that was really fun to learn about. But
he's the only Nat 20 we did with Con for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Like no one's
Yeah.
even come close. Honestly,
don't
we've been
see anybody
comparing
being that in the
people to
future.
Napoleon and other podcasts to determine Constitution. So it's finally good to get this one out there in the world. This is a 20 for me too, for
Yep.
a majority of reasons, all of which we already talked about. So go back and listen again. What about intelligence?
Another 20.
Dude, I feel like he can't have 20 charisma, constitution, and intelligence.
Okay, so I think he can because we gave him... Well, first of all, I didn't give him a 20 charisma.
I did. That's the only one I was like 100% sure about, honestly.
And the reason I didn't give him a 20 was because of the whole,
Autism.
strugsies with the... well, maybe that too. But
Because of the lady struggles.
yeah,
God, he really
the
was a
opposite of Lady
simp,
Luck.
man. Gosh.
He
Fine,
was.
I'll take him
Poor
down
guy.
to an 18.
Okay, I think
Those are
that's fair.
simp points. You lose.
Now, I also kind of bodied him on wisdom. I gave him an 11.
I gave him 10. So like this was the most
I'm
roller
with
coaster ass stat sheet I've ever seen. So it was like I had like we're at 8 strength, 10 dexterity, then we go 20,
Yep.
10, 18.
Hear me out. I almost think we should give him a negative modifier for wisdom. Really, the Russia thing is like genuinely one of the biggest military blunders of all time, still to this day.
Like,
Probably
he did a
is
lot
considered
of wise
the biggest
stuff
one.
too, though.
I think it was more intelligence. Wisdom, I think of as like survival.
The wisdom
and things like
intelligence
that.
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we always go
okay,
back to it,
that's
and it's a
fair.
weird abstract concept.
He's too
I
strong.
think we give him a 20 in intelligence.
He needs an 8.
Give him a 9.
He
Yeah,
needs an
8 or a
He
9.
needs
I'm
an
cool
8.
with that.
It's pretty irrelevant whether we do 8 or 9. They're the same mod.
He also wanted to send hot air balloons over the British Channel. Like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, see, he had some kooky stuff for sure.
Yeah, freaking loon.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm good with those stats. Are you good with those stats?
Yep, definitely.
All right. This has got to be like a 6-hour podcast. This was Napoleon. We had great fun researching him. This was my favorite one so far. I think I've said that like 4 times. I hope I keep saying it because
Yeah, it's definitely one of mine too.
this was really cool. Something I wanted to mention at the end of this pod is something that you could do to really help us with our podcasting careers here. Go to iTunes, go to our podcast and leave a review. Be honest, if you hate it, leave a 1. Don't leave a 1. If you love it, leave a 5. Tell us why. Tell us what you'd like to see. Tell us any changes. Go check us out on Instagram at History5E, Twitter, all those good places, YouTube. We have a bunch of videos coming up on there, and you could probably see character sheets there as well. So,
yeah, and I just want to say we really want to find a way to communicate with you guys because a lot of what we do is talk to each other about our ideas.
and I'm sick of talking to Alan.
Yeah, me too. I'm sick of talking to me too. I talk to me all the time. And so we really want a way for you guys to get in contact with us. We do have an email. It's called History5E Podcast. Or, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Is
yeah.
it? Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's History5E Podcast at gmail.com.
Yeah.
We would honestly love to hear from you
Yeah,
guys.
anything.
I'm
I'm also going to give you Alan's cell phone number. It's going to be
Please do not.
447. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
So I would say also YouTube. We want to put all of our podcasts on there. We're going to be doing that. Leave us a comment. Genuinely, we would love to know what you guys think. If you guys think we're way off, or if you guys think we're right on, or somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, love to do an episode on just discussion of changes and where maybe we need to make some adjustments. And, I think that'd be fun. So
Definitely.
all right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will be signing out. Have a good week, month, year, day, decade. Go Napoleon. See ya.
Viva la France.
Viva la France!